Congressman, good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Sean. It's great to see you also.
All right. So yesterday, this team of Trump senior folks led by Don Jr. Landed in Greenland. The President of the United States talked about this at his press event. You are a former Navy SEAL, current
Correct.
Congressman, obviously. Just explain two things to us. Number one, strategically, how important would that be? And then secondly, legislatively or whatever, I mean, in terms of the Congress's aspect of this, how would you guys receive something like this?
Well, it's a very interesting proposition, isn't it? I mean, Greenland is in a very strategic position globally, I mean, just geographically. And with all of the talk about Russia trying to get involved more in the Arctic, that would posture us better to make sure that we can at least remain competitive with our the Russians who aren't exactly our friends. I wouldn't call them our enemies right now, but there's certainly some folks that have not been friendly to us. So it's a very, very interesting prospect. I don't know if the Icelandic people would go for it, but there's fishing up there, which we need to make sure that we have a constant stream of protein. So it would expand our ability economically to help feed our people and make sure that we remain competitive for gas and oil in the Arctic and also for transatlantic shipping.
So let me just ask you, if you came home to your constituents and said, hey, we have a deal to form some alliance, or we're going to make it a protectorate like Guam or something, how do you think your constituents, would they view this as a favorable thing?
Well, my constituents personally would rather us have Norway be part of the United States because I represent a large group of Norwegians. So I don't know that the Greenland population, the Greenlandic folks, I don't have a big constituency of those folks, but
no. But I mean, I guess the bigger question is, do you think that, I think you laid out a very compelling case as to what that would present to us strategically, potentially other rare earth minerals, fishing. I mean, there's some huge benefits to that, but I'm being serious. Do you think that people in the U.S. and you represent the heartland of America, do you think that they go, hey, this is smart, this makes sense, or are they scratching their head saying, why Greenland?
Well, I think if you lay out the compelling case from a national security perspective, from a homeland security perspective, from a food security perspective, from a being able to project strategic strength around the world perspective, making sure that we have access to gas and oil in the Arctic, I think that when you lay out a reasonable set of propositions, that the American people will listen. And I think that they'll weigh it. If it's more beneficial for the American people, then they should support it. And if it's not, then they shouldn't. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. I think that this is going to be interesting. So many people are dismissing this. I actually predict by the end of 4 years of this Trump administration that there is some kind of deal with Greenland. Eric Prince was on the show a couple of weeks ago before Christmas, and really made a really interesting case as to how close we've come in the past to making a deal with them under the first Trump term, but also why strategically this makes sense from a military perspective, as you talked about Russia, et cetera. I think this is something that people are that don't appreciate how close we're actually going to come to making this deal happen. And I think it's going to there'll be some kind of arrangement that will happen between now and the end of this Trump administration.
Well, right now we do have a relationship with Iceland. So there's Reykjavik and Keflavik. We have a military base that we fly in and out of when we hop over to Europe, back and forth. So just geographically, Greenland is much larger than Iceland, obviously.
Well, we have a former Air Force base, now Space Force base there that I think that's the beginning. That's sort of like a beachhead. We've already got the beginnings of a relationship there.
Yeah, and I think it's great. I mean, they're allies. They have been allies for a long period of time. And let's see how it unfolds.
All right. You guys had this vote on speaker, and it was funny. I kept seeing you behind Mike Johnson, literally, physically, not just figuratively. What was going on there? What I didn't understand was I'm fine with people who have issues, but I was like, what's the plan B? I didn't understand what was going on. And what was the chatter among your colleagues? I was like, okay, if you're going to take down Johnson, what's the plan B? Who is the replacement? What do you want? What are the concessions? And I walked away from that fight going, there doesn't seem to be much that people are fighting for.
Yes, at the end of the day, Mike Johnson got reelected on the first ballot for the speakership. And there were some of my colleagues who were concerned about some of the procedural things, that how the previous Congress had worked with getting bills to the floor and discussing different methods of making sure that they've been heard. And they were heard very loud and clear. Obviously, they wound up voting for Mike Johnson, and that's great. So what I like about the Republican conference is also something that's the most frustrating part about the Republican conference, is that we have very, very smart people here. But we also have a lot of intellectual diversity, which I don't see coming from across the aisle. So we have to understand that we need to listen to every member of our conference from all the different caucuses, because they have a tremendous amount to add. But we also have to understand the big picture, and that we are members of a team. President Trump was given an overwhelming, resounding mandate by the American people as an individual to be president. And then the Republican conference and the Republican Senate collectively as a deliberative body were given a mandate. So we are off to a fantastic start. And I know that the Capitol Hill press folks are not really super happy that, we're not throwing sticks and stones at each other today, and we're not going to. So we're working together. We are in the boat, and we are rowing in the same direction. And the person who is really leading that direction is President Trump. And he is the captain of the team. He picked his first lieutenant. His name is Mike Johnson. The conference got on board, and we are communicating like we have never communicated before. We have a working relationship with the Senate, that we went through that with the CR process. And then when President Trump gets sworn in on the 20th, we're going to have vertically integrated government, which is what we're supposed to be doing. And I want to be very clear. So President Trump is not overstepping his Article 2 authorities. What he's doing is making sure that the Article 1 authorities, that's us, Congress, that we are empowered to enact the agenda that's been laid out by the American public. So this is not a separation of powers issue. This is a team working together issue. And I'm very excited about what's going to happen the next 2 years, working with the entire spectrum of our conference.
You guys had this strategy meeting at Fort McNair over the weekend before the
awesome.
Snowstorm. Was that something that you came to resolution on, how to proceed with this massive reconciliation bill? I know there's a lot of inside baseball talk about, is it one big bill? Is it two? What do you put in it? I mean, where does this stand right now, especially after the weekend discussions?
I tell you what, that weekend discussion was possibly the best meeting I've had in the 2 years I've been. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. So the individual committee chairs are up there, and we're discussing the budget reconciliation process. And then the work that Jason Smith has done under Ways and Means was just phenomenal, laying out a very clear, deliberative, very bold set of ideas. So people have to understand, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden drove this country so far left because they used the budget reconciliation process. What that means is, for the people that don't get the difference, is you don't need a supermajority in the Senate. You only need a majority of 51, right? We've got 54 senators now. So we're going to use the same techniques and procedures that the left did to get our country back towards the middle and to the center right, which is where the vast majority of the American public are. So this is going to be the boldest, most aggressive use of budget reconciliation that the Republican Party has ever done in the history of Congress. And I'm super stoked about it.
What gets you stoked about it? Like, what's in it? What were these discussions like? What should we get excited about?
Well, first and foremost, getting the border secure. We have to get the border secure. We have to get spending under control. We have to protect Social Security to make sure that our senior citizens who earned those benefits, I don't think that is an entitlement, that they are able to live in comfort and peace throughout the rest of their golden years because they earned it. They built this country. So we're protecting Social Security. We want to really look at eliminating or grossly reducing the death tax, because that's what's killing our family farms. A farm is an economic unit, Sean. You got to have the right amount of people, you need to have the right amount of land, and you need to have the right amount of iron. That's your farm equipment. Well, if you pass the farm on to the next generation and you've got to pay a massive tax bill, you're going to have to get rid of one of those. And what happens is people either sell their land or their iron, and that gets that three-legged stool off balance, and you fall over and the family farm closes. So if people really want to maintain family farms, we have to get rid of that death tax. And there's a whole myriad of other things that will be coming out. How this is going to proceed is each one of the committees are going to hold individual meetings, listening sessions, along with the leadership. This is going to take care of some of the issues that the folks were a little reticent voting for Mike Johnson to begin with, and include the entire conference so that we can do this right. President Trump wants one big, beautiful bill, and Senator Thune is open to that. We're open to that, obviously. If it has to be one or two, to me, it's really irrelevant, because we want to make sure that we do this right.
Yeah. Did you feel like there was a sense of unity walking out of that Fort McNair meeting? Like, were people like, all right, I'm on board? Or was there a lot of hand wringing where it's like, well, it doesn't include my two things that I need?
There was no hand wringing that I saw. People understand that when we are doing things like this, you don't get everything you want. You're just never going to get every single thing you want. And what I tell people this all the time, if you get everything you want all the time, you're not governing, you're ruling. And the American public shall not be ruled.
You need to tell that to my kids.
Yeah, well, it's different with kids, you know that. But so, Sean, everybody here really has a sense of a higher purpose. And the higher purpose is getting the country back on track. And I firmly believe that my colleagues are going to put aside any petty differences that they have and make sure that we can do this collectively. There's things, everybody has their own topic that they're very, very passionate about. And I, again, have a lot of confidence that our leadership is going to really focus in on individual members so that we can represent our district, because they know that nobody here in DC voted for us. We are here because of the people in our district voting for us.
One of the things you mentioned just a second ago was spending reduction, which is music to my ears. I wanted to start with this question. You, like I mentioned before, you're a Navy SEAL. You get like national security probably more than most people. Do you believe, and do you think your colleagues believe, that the national debt is a national security issue?
Absolutely.
And you think your colleagues get that?
They do. I mean, absolutely. You can't deny it. When we've got $37 trillion in debt, that's going to come home to roost. Our debt to GDP ratio is the highest it's ever been in the history of the country. I think it may have been a little higher in World War II, but we're fighting a global war at that time. But so, yeah, we understand that. We also understand that we're not riding a motorcycle. We are steering an aircraft carrier, and you're a ship driver. So, the ship goes like this. It doesn't turn on a dime. But it's been clearly recognized that we cannot grow the economy out of this debt. So there has to be a combination of growth, looking at 1% to 3% GDP increase, right? So there has to be that growth, but there also has to be reduction in spending.
Yeah. Because
otherwise you can't circle that square.
All right, just to be clear, I can drive a boat. I can sail very well. I'm not a what we call in the Navy a surface warfare officer. So
a ship driver.
Yeah, ship driver. I just want to be clear for the.
I stand corrected.
Yeah. But I don't want any accusations of stolen valor. My God. I've written about ship drivers, but I've not been one.
Just for the stolen valor thing, to clear this up, Gilligan was a ship driver, so I don't think that's just throwing that out there.
Oh boy, we're gonna start something. All right, so the thing that's interesting to me is, like, look, I think that you talk about going back to your constituents, and I've been in politics for 30 years, and people go back and campaign on what I got for you, right? I got you this building, we passed this thing, this tax cut, whatever. I've never seen anyone, for the most part, go back and say, I reduced the deficit, I cut spending. And what I worry about is that it's just not sexy. It's not cool. It's important. I think it's critical to national security, as you said. But how do you get people on board that, like, hey, we got to go sell that we're $37 trillion in debt. We've got a massive deficit every year, and we need to get these things under control. How do you tell a bunch of politicians that this is a good selling point?
Well, you can do both things, Sean. Bringing money back to the district, I think, is actually how the Constitution says that Article 1 should be exercised. So what happens now is Washington, D.C. sends a bunch of money. Let's take Wisconsin. They send a bunch of money to Madison, Wisconsin, and Tony Evers is a radical leftist governor. What Tony Evers does is Madison sends money to Madison and Milwaukee, the two Democrat strongholds in the state of Wisconsin. And that is actually subverting the will of Congress. So when we go back and we have these community projects, you would call them earmarks, I speak directly to my constituents and find out exactly what they need. And then they put in a request for these community-directed spending projects. And then that money goes from Washington, D.C. directly to those projects. So there's no middleman, and Tony Evers doesn't get to give money to his friends. So I actually think that is a judicious expenditure of taxpayers' dollars. So that part, I think, is going to take care of itself. Understanding the fact that, we have to reduce the budget isn't sexy. And on that note, I don't want politics to be exciting. Politics should be about as boring as possible. We weren't elected to become members of a reality television show. We were elected to come up here to do really boring work. That's sitting down and grinding out policy, which we do all the time, to make sure that we can have the best possible outcome for the most Americans. And this means that, we are going to have to talk about incredibly boring things like reducing the debt. But if we don't talk about boring things like reducing the debt, we're never going to reduce it, and we're going to continue this downward spiral of economic disaster that these past few administrations have put us on, especially Joe Biden, holy beans.
Yeah, and even before, quote, reducing spending, there's just efficiencies. There's wasteful stuff. I still don't get why any Republican can sit there with a straight face and explain to me why we need NPR and PBS, government-funded things that are contrary, and regardless of their ideological bent. How the heck that is a federal deal is beyond me. And I don't know why we can't start with the easy and just go down a list and say, all right, everyone in the Republican conference, do you agree that these 50 programs are stupid and wasteful, duplicative, inefficient, whatever? Let's start with $100 million. Maybe that's not going to change the trajectory of the budget tomorrow, but let's show the American people we got the message.
Well, let me tell you the most egregious example of this buffoonery that I've seen since I've been here. I chair a subcommittee for the subcommittee for economic opportunity on Veterans Affairs. And there's something called the Digital GI Bill. And what it is a service member earns educational benefits, and you want to go to an institution. And you just have to make sure that the veteran gets paid their stipend, right? And then the school gets paid for tuition and books and whatnot, right? That's all it does. There's a series of legacy systems. They're trying to consolidate them. Good on you. The original estimate by the VA was $25 million. You're like, well, that's a lot of money. But you think about the millions of veterans that are doing it, you're like, okay, I can see that, right? Consolidating legacy systems and whatnot. You know what the final tab is going to be for that?
$1 billion.
$960 million. Yeah. So when you go from 25 to 960, that's a problem. Here's the real problem, Sean. I've identified these people by name who are responsible for this, and I can't fire them.
But what is it? It's not their name. Like, what are they doing to run up the cost?
They're finding people who are trying to do this, and they muddle through these programs. Oh my gosh, try the electronic health record, the same thing.
Yep.
They hire these contractors that fail miserably because they don't do the appropriate planning and set metrics of success before they launch it. And they do this over and over and over again.
So how many times have we, there's a program in the Navy to do fitness reports, and for year after year, they have to take it offline. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, I don't understand how you can fail this bad.
Listen, man, I could have got an army of teenagers and paid them in Pop-Tarts and Red Bull and had this done for about $500.
That's not MAHA approved. That's not MAHA approved. Kennedy would have a problem with that, all the red dye there.
Listen, you have to make some sacrifices, right? So, the whole Doge thing is great. I'm a member of the Doge caucus in Congress, and I volunteered to take on the DoD portfolio for the Doge caucus here. By the way, it's official as of this morning. I am on the House Armed Services Committee. So
congratulations.
Thank you. I'll be putting that out later. I don't know what subcommittees I'll
Can I ask you a question, though, on that?
Sure.
President on Monday was on Hugh Hewitt, and I so applaud him for this. You're the perfect person to ask this now based on our ship driving conversation. Mm-hmm. But I feel like we've taken our eye off the ball in so many fronts, manufacturing, et cetera. But especially on our national security, like we're now down to 280 something ships.
Right.
We are not able to compete effectively with China because we've lost the defense industrial ability to build ships at the rate that we could. Our munitions are done. How much is this? I guess this is the same kind of question, though. And I know it's the opposite of spending, of cutting the deficit. But I want to spend where we need money. I want a robust Navy. I want to deter China. And I feel like we've taken our eye off the ball when it comes to munitions, when it comes to shipbuilding, et cetera.
Every single dollar that we spend in the Department of Defense that does not increase lethality is a wasted dollar.
Yep.
And that means taking care of the sailor, because the sailor's going to push the button. The frogman is going to pick up the rifle. The Marine is a rifleman. So we have to support the basic unit of the military is the soldier, sailor, airman, Marine. They have to be supported, right? And then they have to have the appropriate equipment, yes. And then they have to have the authority. So those first two things are money. The authorities thing is a legislative process, and it's also an executive branch function. So we are spending money in areas that are not increasing lethality, and that is a wasted dollar. So when Pete Hegseth gets in and shakes that tree, the Pentagon, and stuff starts falling off there, that's going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
So we will actually increase the lethality of the Department of Defense if we do focused spending, not just keep throwing money to the DoD, right? They've failed every single audit they've ever done. No one's ever been fired. If you failed audits at a private company, you'd be out, Jack, right? So why are these folks, these GS-15s and SESs and flag officers and general officers, why are they not losing their jobs?
I know.
They're failing miserably. They need to. They need to just cut and run. Beat it, Jack. You're not doing your job for the American public. And that's what I believe Pete Hegseth is going to be doing, cleaning house, man.
All right. Speaking of failure to hold people accountable, these incidents that occurred over New Year's, these acts of terrorism, you saw the one down in New Orleans, obviously this guy blowing himself up. Again, this is so in your wheelhouse, legislatively, plus your background. But I just want to start with, there's a lot of rumors. I asked Seb Gorka about this yesterday. Is there anything in the event that occurred at the Trump Hotel in Vegas? There's a lot of rumors out there that this guy was talking about drones and cover-ups and anything. Is there anything that you as a special operator flag and go, okay, that doesn't sound right, or this is just a guy that's going nuts?
Let's start with the first one in New Orleans, because this has to be addressed. The FBI is so far off mission, it's embarrassing. So they have a finite amount of resources, both human and physical infrastructure, and they focused it on chasing down my brother and sisters, Catholics, who are practicing their religion as they see fit in a peaceful manner. They're sending FBI agents to school board meetings and classifying parents who have very real concerns about the education that their children are getting. They're using the same classifications that they do for domestic terrorists. They're hunting down grandmothers in Oklahoma who were standing on the Capitol grounds January 6th, 4 years ago. So they are off mission. And it is, you can exercise predictive analysis and say there is a greater potentiality of a Muslim service member being radicalized and committing terrorist acts than there is for someone going to a school board meeting. I give you Hassan, right? The Fort Hood shooter, right? Hassan Nadal, right? So let's put that there. Get Christopher Wray out of there. He is a disgrace. Get Kash Patel in now. But when you're talking about the thing that took place in Las Vegas, to me, it's just so odd. I still am not quite sure what to make of this, right? So you had a Army Special Forces senior enlisted guy, senior non-commissioned officer, stationed at 110, which is in a little village called Birmingham. I know because I used to live right across the street from where that guy was stationed. He served honorably, did multiple combat tours. I understand he just picked up his team sergeant slot. That's like being a SEAL platoon chief. That's like the pinnacle of any enlisted person's career. I guess he had some issues with marriages and whatnot, which happens, unfortunately, in the military frequently. And then for him to come back over here on leave and blow himself up in a cyber truck in front of Trump Tower, there's just so many things that just don't make sense at all. The first one, a radicalized Muslim committing terrorist acts. We've seen that over and over and over again in the United States. That's where the FBI should be focusing on. And the DOD should have been doing a better screening of this guy. And also, but with the guy, the Special Forces soldier in Las Vegas, I still don't know quite what to make of this. So we have to do a really, really serious look into this stuff. Unfortunately, I don't trust the FBI. I'm a member of Congress. I don't trust the FBI under Christopher Wray's leadership. So we're going to have them and some other organizations look at this. And I would really like it if Congress was able to get involved in this so that we could have a neutral arbiter looking over the shoulder of the FBI till they get their act together under Kash Patel.
Yeah, that's the right answer. Congressman Van Orden, appreciate your continued service to the country. Congratulations on your appointment to the Armed Services Committee, and thanks for sharing your insight with us.
Yeah, well, God bless you and have a great new year, pal.
Thank you. Guys, thanks for being here. Great conversation, as I said. Amazing panel tomorrow. We got Matt Laszlo talking about UFO and drones like you'll hear from nowhere else on Friday. Sign up at my newsletter, SeanSpicer.com, to get all of the information that you're not seeing about balls and inauguration, etc. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.